Marvel Comics are probably losing sleep over these numbers that we're about to talk about, and quite frankly, they should be. You know, you go into your Barnes & Noble, your bookstore, there's always an entire wall of manga, the little bitty section of DC, Marvel, indie comic books or whatever. And DC Comics have found a way to crack through that manga wall and make an impact in the industry with a format war that is quite frankly embarrassing on the part of Marvel Comics. And by the time I'm done delivering all these details on what's going on here, you're going to see exactly why Marvel are so far behind. It's embarrassing at this point. But first, we need to talk about some of these numbers that should be terrifying everybody at Marvel Comics these days. Here's the statistic that should make every Marvel executive question their entire strategy. When DC launched Compact Comics in June of 2024, something unprecedented happened. Picture the scene. Comic book stores across America started calling DC, begging for more copies. Not just a few stores, not just the big chains, but everyone. All 10 titles went back for a second printing immediately. Watchmen, third printing. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. And I had to double check these numbers because I couldn't believe it myself. DC's Compact Comics alone, just this one line accounted for 15% of the top 20 bookstore bestsellers in 2024 for superheroes. Marvel as an entire company, everything they produced in the year of 2024, 12%. Let that sink in. A single DC product line is outselling everything Marvel publishes combined in the most important retail space in America. When Marvel's executives saw these numbers, they panicked. They rushed to create their premier collection line. But by then, the damage was already done. DC had already basically won the war. And we basically immediately saw the results of the impact that DC's Compact Comic line was having with their Circana book scan numbers. Immediately, best-selling books up and down the line for DC Compact Comics. This was a format that people wanted. They wanted the smaller travel size. There are entire generations of comic book readers whose preferred format for comic books is much smaller than we're traditionally used to, at least the older generation like you and I. DC Comics saw an opportunity. They pounced on it. We flagged it right here on the channel as something that was a very smart move and something that was likely to succeed. And even I didn't believe it would succeed to quite this degree, where it would basically be dominating the superhero graphic novel sales charts and start to make an impact on the overall best-selling graphic novels in the entire industry, which DC really hadn't been a part of in 3 or 4 years, and Marvel still isn't a part of. It made that kind of an impact that immediately. It's not surprising Marvel decided to come back and do something of their own, but they've made several bad decisions along the way. The first one is calling it Marvel Premier Collection. It just makes it sound like it's a trade versus DC's Compact Comics, which tells you exactly what it is. But it only got worse from there. Now I'm going to reveal the secret that DC figured out and Marvel completely missed. And it's so obvious once you see it that you wonder how Marvel executives still have a job. Walk into any bookstore, Barnes & Noble, Target, whatever. And I want you to look at the manga section. What do you see? Hundreds, maybe thousands of books, all the exact same size. They fit perfectly in your hands. They slip into backpacks. They stack beautifully on shelves. That size, 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches. Now guess what size DC made their Compact Comics? Exactly 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches. DC essentially created superhero manga for American bookstores. But here's where Marvel's response gets embarrassing. They made their premier collection 6 inches by 9 inches, just half an inch bigger in each direction, and charge $14.99 instead of DC's $9.99. That's 50% more expensive for a format that doesn't fit with anything else on the shelf. Marvel looked at DC's genius move and said, hey, let's make it bigger and more expensive. It's like they were trying to fail. And they forgot to promote that they were doing it. Most people had no idea that Marvel were even trying to compete with manga or DC's Compact Comics with their Marvel Premier Collection. They did not get the word out, and then when they finally arrived, they were $5 more expensive, and the format size is noticeably bigger than what people are used to reading these days, especially younger readers. What an enormous folly on the part of Marvel Comics. You see what DC's done, who are basically just copying what manga have done. It's very, very successful for them, but they can't do it like DC because we're Marvel. We've got to do it the Marvel way and completely fuck it up. Now, there have been a couple that have done pretty well, but nothing making quite the impact of DC Comics. The fact that Marvel haven't gone back and tried to right this wrong already just tells you how stupid they are in 2025. And the title selection tells the complete story of why David is destroying Goliath in this fight. DC came out swinging with their A-team. Watchmen, All-Star Superman, Batman Court of Owls, Batman Hush. 9 heavy hitters in total, all standalone stories that don't require years of comic book knowledge to understand. These aren't just good comics, they're gateway drugs designed to turn casual readers into lifelong fans. Meanwhile, Marvel shows up to this war with 4 titles. Daredevil Born Again, Black Panther A Nation Under Our Feet, Captain America Winter Soldier, and Fantastic Four Solve Everything. It's like bringing a knife to a gunfight, except the knife costs 50% more than the gun. The results, All-Star Superman and Watchmen are putting up numbers that we haven't seen from superhero books in bookstores in years. With one retailer reporting customers are buying multiple DC compact titles in single visits, Marvel's smaller selection at higher prices means they're fighting for scraps of a market that DC is already dominating. DC came out with their first line of 8 comic books. Marvel's first line, 4 comic books. If you want to put out the Ta-Nehisi Coates Black Panther run, you're going to have to come a little bit stronger than just Daredevil Born Again and Captain America the Winter Soldier. 2 amazing stories, and they certainly are making their mark. But there just isn't enough to back them up like the DC Compact Comics line has. Plus, it already had basically a year on them, and they're on the second and third wave of those comic books. And they put out the heavy hitters, the perennial sellers, and now they're selling like gangbusters in this compact comic form size. Now, Marvel are coming out with their second wave, and it does have Civil War and some other very, very awesome stories in there, but they're all $5 more. And there's enormous displays. We see them all around the country of DC advertising their compact comics line at $9.99, and you just don't see the same thing with Marvel. You don't see the enthusiasm for Marvel's premier collection because it's too expensive, it's too big, and they didn't put enough awesome titles out there. They put 2 amazing titles, and they bookended it with 2 pretty average titles. They should have curated this line far better, in my personal opinion, and DC Comics are so far ahead of the game that it's not even funny. Marvel are going to have to do some serious work to even catch up, and they should probably downsize it to the exact same size DC is doing, and they should definitely knock off $5 from the price. And this all means something to the future of comic books. This story is bigger than DC versus Marvel. The industry is transforming. There are 2 or 3 generations of comic book readers that love reading comic books. They do it every single day. They are used to reading manga tankobons that are the format that DC compact comics are in. And DC went and attacked that market. It was obviously there, and they had a very successful strategy. And Marvel dropped the ball. DC cracked the code that could potentially bring in millions upon millions of new readers, and Marvel dropped the ball out of the gate. Marvel is still trying to compete in this space with yesterday's strategies. And the question isn't whether Marvel's going to catch up. The question is, does Marvel even understand that they made a mistake? Do they even understand why this didn't work like DC's compact comics line did? Are fans more likely to pick up a $10 DC compact comic that fits perfectly in line with their manga collection, or a Marvel Premier Collection comic book that's $15, that's bigger than their entire collection and doesn't fit in with anything? What would you guys do? I definitely want to hear from you in the comments section. What do you think of this DC compact comic versus Marvel Premier Collection thing? Because I think DC made all the right moves and Marvel absolutely dropped the ball. And if you want continued coverage of all the biggest winners and losers in the comic book industry, I would definitely encourage you to come support us on Patreon. Your support means more than you could possibly imagine. There's a link in the video description. There's a button right here. And I do hope to see you at the Patreon very, very soon.